My thing with stir fries is that I think they're a really joyous thing. Like, I love a really good stir fry, but so often the meat in a stir fry is really bad. I have a solution, or I think I have a solution for that. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go through cuts of beef, then we're going to go through a slicing technique that's going to get you a more tender piece of beef, and then we're going to go through my ultimate trick to getting really tender beef. And at the end, I'm going to figure out, do I need to spend a lot or a little or something in between to make the most tender beef stir fry? You know, this is actually very surprising. It's noticeably softer.
Noticeably softer.
So what have we got here? We have a spectrum here of some cuts of beef. Now, I went to the supermarket, I wanted to choose what was widely available. So we're starting off here with our eye fillet. This is well known to be one of the most expensive cuts of meat, also supposed to be one of the most tender, interestingly. Scotch fillet, still kind of expensive. We're up here in the dollars. Not as expensive as here, but also expensive. Sirloin, interestingly, also known as strip loin. This one's kind of in the middle. So we'll see how that one goes. Now, rump, this one is probably most commonly used for stir fries in Australia, and it's fairly economical, so that's probably why. And then we come right down here to our chuck steak. Now, this is also known as gravy beef. It's mainly muscle and connective tissue. Now, I gotta say, I've actually never stir fried with chuck steak, so this will be interesting. And you're ranging here between $3.75 up to $16 for a stir fry with your eye fillet. So that's our range. Wouldn't it be good if you could just use the chuck and it was like $3? That would be good. Anyway, we'll see. So slicing is actually really important when it comes to trying to get the most tenderness out of your beef or your cut of steak. The general wisdom is that you want to be slicing across the grain. Now, what's the grain? You can see that the grain here is running lengthways across that piece of meat. Now, if I slice this way with the grain, you'll see that the piece has long strands of that muscle. Now, that's actually harder for you to chew than if you slice across the grain like this. And you can see already that I can just pull that apart. Just slicing it differently, and it's already looking more tender. It does get a little tricky when you start to get to pieces like the rump. There are grains going all over the place here. Just a little bit about common sense. So when you get to a piece of meat like this, what you want to be doing is cutting it into the sections where you can see the grains running, and then using your knife to cut across the grain for that particular section. Now, you'll see that I'm slicing this very thin because, again, by slicing thin, you're making it easier for you to bite through, getting a more tender slice. So I'm going to go with the grain and against the grain for each of these. We're going to cook them, and then I'm going to taste them and see exactly the difference that this makes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's so weird just to be cooking like 5 pieces of meat. All right, so here we are. We have our selection of unseasoned meats. It's like the opposite of what you want at your barbecue. But anyway, the point is here that I'm tasting purely for tenderness right now. So I'm going to start with the eye fillet. I'm going to start with the against the grain slice. Definitely tender. Yeah, I guess it's just tender. But I'll taste the eye fillet now with the grain. It's definitely less tender, but I think because it is an eye fillet, it's still kind of tender. Like, it's not really tough. Scotch fillet, let's have a look. Now this is with the grain. There's a really big difference there. That was definitely like a bit of like a pull to get through that bite. So sirloin next, pretty tender. Definitely less tender. That piece is really tough. Okay, that's definitely making a big difference. It's like eating a shoe. Oh, okay, let's go for this chuck. That is surprisingly tender, I have to say. Definitely, for sure, I can categorically say this like slice against the grain thing it's a thing. Not so important if you're up here in the eye fillet world, but as we go down the line here, get down to that rump and that chuck, with the grain slices are pretty much like inedible. I really learned a lot from that experiment. I'm actually really excited to do some stir frying with that against the grain slice of chuck. I should stop pointing with my chopsticks because it's very rude. Okay, so the marinade is the most important part here. Now, my little secret weapon, my arsenal of marinade ingredients here are baking soda, corn flour, sugar, and soy sauce. So the baking soda is an alkaline ingredient that will neutralize the acids on the outside of the beef strips, which actually kind of prevents like the proteins of the beef from tightening up like as they cook in the heat. The corn flour actually kind of protects the beef a little bit as it's cooking, but it kind of tricks your mouth into thinking that the surface of the beef is a little softer because that flour coating makes it a little softer. Sugar is all about making things brown faster, and the soy sauce obviously for flavor, salty umaminess. So the question is, does it work as well on your chuck steak, so your cheapest cut, as on your most expensive cut and the in-between? So for the stir fry, I'm going to add oil into a hot wok and I'm going to add the beef in and spread it out so I get maximum char on each piece of beef. Then I'm going to stir fry again, add in my garlic and onion, give that a toss through. Then I'm going to add capsicum and now my stir fry sauce. Oyster sauce, Chinese Shaoxing wine, soy sauce, dark soy sauce and some white vinegar. And then finally just toss through some spring onion. That's kind of like my standard stir fry sauce mix. Okay, so I'm going to start with the eye fillet. I got to say that when I was cooking this, the meat was kind of broke up a lot and it almost looks mincy rather than a nice stir fry texture. So that kind of surprised me because, you know, I was thinking premium cut, that's probably going to be the best, but it's really tender. It disintegrates probably like too quickly. That's a real surprise to me. I thought that I would like that one the best because it was the most expensive, but maybe not. Scotch next. Already I have a nice slice of beef, which is what you want for a stir fry. It's tender, it's lovely, the flavor's nice. I like it. All right, let's go with the sirloin. Again, nice slice of beef, which is good. It's actually a little difficult to tell the difference between those two, the Scotch and the sirloin. This one would cost you $13.75 to make that in your stir fry. That's just the beef. This one will cost you $10. You can't really tell the difference. So there you go. That's a good saving. All right, so now we're up to rump. I think there's a noticeable difference in the chewiness of the rump. Look, I wouldn't say it's tough, but definitely not as tender as these two. Let's do the chuck. You know, this is actually very surprising. This is more tender than the rump, but I don't know whether that's possible. To me, it tastes more tender. It actually tastes more on par with the sirloin or the Scotch, which is so surprising. $3.75 to cook that, $16 to cook that. This one is actually obviously the worst, I think. It doesn't even look as good. And this one is really, I'm gonna get a second opinion. Jamie!
It's softer.
It's noticeably softer.
It's noticeably softer.
It's weird, but it's true.
It's delicious. $3.75?
$3.75. 16.
Chuck all day.
I know, right?
100%.
I love this. This has like changed my life.
Is that my lunch?
Can it be mine too?
No,
We'll go share it.
fine.
Has Hayley got rice for us?